Hello, and welcome to Overcome a Mental Health podcast. I am your host, Travis White. This is a place where you can share your mental health stories. I'm very excited to be with you today and very excited to be speaking with Cole Grace. Cole is a combat veteran who has struggled with PTSD for over 20 years. He wrote a book about practical ways to manage mental health and improve your quality of life. The book is called Internal is Greater Than External, Calming the Chaos Within. Cole, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on, Travis. I'm excited to get into talking about it.
My pleasure. And I'm just going to hand the time right over to you and let you share your journey.
Right. Well, the journey starts in childhood, where most journeys do, but I didn't really acknowledge this trauma. This is something that I talk about until further on in my journey. But they're what I would call little T traumas or micro traumas, or, abandonment. My parents were divorced when I was 4. I had like a stomach surgery when I was 6 weeks old. We lived in Texas, Houston, Texas. My dad was doing hurricane work, and he's sober now, but at the time he was an alcoholic and a drug addict. So it's kind of tumultuous in the first 4 years of my life. Then they divorced. And then from 4 to 8, we moved around a lot. But there wasn't anything that was like stood out as far as like physical abuse or sexual abuse or anything like that. So I kind of just, whatever. I'm 8 years old and now I'm starting to do better, and through high school playing sports and living a decent life. So I didn't apply myself in school and certain things. And, that would carry on into when I went overseas after I joined the military. After that, I joined the military, and it was a pretty high stress job that I did. Was route clearance, where we would find and disarm roadside bombs. And then I would also be a security escort for supply convoys we would ride like 1,000 meters out in front of them with a gun truck, and I'm in a turret, and we're trying to set off like ambushes and look for any signs of roadside bombs before the main body of the convoy gets there. So both of those jobs are pretty intense, and those led me to having hypervigilance because of a constant state of fight or flight and awareness, and having a chemical dump of adrenaline and cortisol going through your body. And also perfectionism, because like I said, when I was younger, I didn't apply myself very much. I didn't do that well in school, even though I was intelligent. But when our first people got killed in Iraq, it was like, if you make a mistake, people die, and you don't tend to pay attention as much. This is this identity, this negative belief that I had about myself. So I created like this really mean perfectionist inner critic to never make a mistake. And that served me in that moment, in that time while I'm doing what I'm doing. But then afterwards, it carries over into civilian life after. And now I have this, really mean inner critic, and it's not life or death. So it's not necessary, and it doesn't serve me. But I started to do some work on the combat trauma when I got home. It was 2005 where I was overseas, and 2006, 2007, 2008. I also developed stomach issues working with radiation and trying to figure out a different method of disarming bombs without anybody having to get out and manually do the work. They were going to try to basically microwave the road so that if you put metal in a microwave, it reacts. Well, that was the idea for having the blasting cap in the bomb to explode, and then we could just drive this vehicle down the road and nobody would have to approach the bombs. So when we were doing that, they didn't have a weapon system on top of that vehicle. So they had me ride out in front of it as the security element, like we were talking about with the supply trucks. And I started to have stomach episodes of pain, nausea, and vomiting that continue to this day. So then I have kind of like childhood trauma, combat trauma, and then chronic illness trauma from being like having anxiety about eating or going to an event and having to leave, guilt about not being able to go back with my friends when they redeployed overseas, medically discharged, and then having like guilt about feeling like a burden when I do get sick and I need help. So I got this really mixed bag of trauma. But at the time, I'm only really focused on combat trauma because that's all I'll kind of acknowledge. I remember going to the first therapist and like asking me about childhood trauma, and I like kind of cussed him out. It was like, I just got done disarming bombs in Iraq. Childhood was fine. I played football. Everything was good. But it wasn't. Later on, I learned more about mental health and I start to revisit some of these core beliefs that I formed in my younger years from like 0 to 5 when my brain wasn't fully developed, but you develop these beliefs that lie subconscious, like I'm not worthy, maybe from abandonment, I'm not lovable, certain things like that that are very impactful later on in life. And I was like more of a people pleaser, seeking external validation, trying to check off things off the external checklist to make myself happy, like getting a good job, getting awards, getting more pay, getting, whatever, a car, whatever you can put on that external checklist. And then as I'm moving to Costa Rica even, and as I'm getting these things checked off, I'm happy for a little bit, but I'm not still at peace. I'm still having these internal negative thoughts and negative self-sabotage moments. And so started to really dig into the childhood and where these negative beliefs and subconscious, because like there's a statistic, like 90 something percent of the choices and decisions that you make in a day come from your subconscious. So if you're never aware of what's happening in your subconscious, it's just on autopilot and you're making decisions based off of old scenarios. Like I talked about being a perfectionist after being in Iraq, that doesn't serve me anymore. And if I never go back and understand why I'm like that, I'm going to keep doing that in a square peg round hole. It's not working. So I need to like reprogram that. And how I do that is when I find things like that, I do like positive affirmations. I do a gratitude practice and I have a mission statement. And so the positive affirmation would be like in traffic, let's say I'm having road rage because basically if somebody cuts into my convoy, they're a threat. They're trying to blow me up in combat. It's not true in civilian life. So I have to tell myself, I'm not in Iraq anymore. You're safe. That's like a positive affirmation whenever I have that trigger. And I do that like daily in the morning anyways. And then so I'll find things like that where I have negative self-talk. If I find myself saying like, you always have bad luck, I'll maybe have a positive affirmation that I don't have bad luck, and, that I have a good life and that sometimes things go wrong, but overall I have a good life. And what happens with that is like your brain has this thing called a reticular activating system, and it's your filter for reality. And so if you can prime your filter, you can say, you want to look for red cars, and all of a sudden you're going to see a bunch of red cars. And it can be primed subconsciously. So if it has negative beliefs and negative things that you believe you always have bad luck, then you're going to be looking for examples of you having bad luck, and it's going to filter and show you those things. Well, conversely, if you flip that and you do a positive one, your brain is going to be looking for things that you're grateful for. It's going to be looking for things that support these positive beliefs. And so your reality is actually going to start to seemingly change. And you're going to start to even attract some of those things that you're almost manifesting them because you're believing the positive side of that. So I started to realize, it's hard when you first start to do it because it's, knowing is half the battle. It was like, I understand now that my road rage comes from being in Iraq. And then I'm like, I solved it. And now I have to do the work and unravel it because it's a really ingrained, learned neural pathway, and your neuroplasticity and your brain will route this reaction. Your body and mind are connected. So when I feel, it can be a smell, it can be a sound, it can be anything that reminds me of that traumatic event or that threat, and it'll send me into the reaction that I've done every time. And so if I'm aware and I can pull myself out, it takes time to recreate a new neural pathway. And so it's like going to the gym. You're going to have to do it multiple times, and it's going to have to become like part of your lifestyle and practice instead of just trying to do it situationally, like when you're depressed and then be like, okay, I'm going to do positive affirmations and like meditation now that I'm depressed. It's not going to work. You're going to be like, this is bullshit. This doesn't work. But sorry.
No, you're good.
Yeah, it's interesting when, I come from a culture where it's not cool to have mental health problems. It's not, it's a tough guy type thing, and you're trained to do these things. So and then admitting to it can kind of lead to like, problems and if you're staying in the military. And so for me to switch my beliefs and humble myself and allow myself to defeat my ego and look at some of these things as more than just feel good, like positive, whatever, um, that there's actual neuroscience behind it and that there's actual, I've seen results myself. And so it's eye-opening for me. And now I really like to talk about that to people and to normalize the conversation around it and to explain to people who might not know that there is a way to improve your quality of life. And it's not, sometimes I think people who are neuroscientists and maybe who are psychotherapists, they kind of have lofty goals. They're like, meditate for like an hour a day. I'm like, I cannot meditate for a minute right now. Like
Yeah.
it's hard. So my book that I wrote and stuff is it's starting small and it's about making progress. It's not about perfection. And I don't have it all figured out. I still struggle. But when I stick to the concepts and I go back and start give myself grace and get back to doing the work, it helps.
Yeah, and you mentioned an important word there, grace. I think that's really important when it comes to like mental health struggles. I found that when I struggle with depression and anxiety myself, and I found out when I was able to start giving myself a little bit of grace, that's when things kind of started falling into place, and I started feeling a little bit better about myself, and was able to actually start subconsciously recognizing that the things that I was thinking like off about, like, like for instance, the negative thoughts, like it's when I add that little bit of grace towards myself, I'm like, oh, like this is what I'm doing bad. This is what I'm thinking negatively. So I like that you mentioned that. But
Yeah, it's important. As a soldier, you're trained to fight in a different way. I'm trained to eliminate the threat, and I'm
mhm,
trained to really, it's a violent fight. And this fight is with myself. And so I have to really be soft on my tactics, like you're talking about. And, the second chapter in my book is awareness, but I paired it with acceptance because you have to have that grace and that acceptance that you're doing the work and stop beating yourself up so much. And we're our own like harshest critic. And it's really good to be nice to yourself.
with the being part of like kind of, well, not kind of like a actual pretty dangerous job or task in the military, how did that affect your view of life, trust, and your own self worth or sense of worth, I should say?
So it's a good question. And at the time, it really makes you accept death and you accept the fact that you could be dead and your true authentic self really comes out. And you almost, you repress a lot of the fear and a lot of the emotions that you go through, which I had to work through eventually later on. But I had a good sense of worth at that time because I was really good at what I did. Like I said, I was a perfectionist and I did these dangerous jobs, but I did them and I stayed alive and I kept other people alive. So then when I come back home though, I'm a pizza cook and I'm getting yelled at for putting too much cheese on a pizza and I'm about to punch the guy in the face. Cause like, you don't know what I was just responsible for. Who gives a shit about, the cheese on the pizza right now? Like, are you serious? And so it was really hard for me to go from being in that important of a position to coming back to the civilian life and then not being that important at all. And as far as trusting other people, they don't have that same sense of urgency. So I don't really trust them as far as any type of security or keeping me safe. So I'm always on guard.
Yeah, I would imagine that'd be really hard to come back and do that. Like, and you're feeling, like so important, and then come back and being a pizza cook. That'd be a hard transition. And at what point did you begin to suspect that military experience caused deep trauma?
So that one, I would say the big T trauma that I talk about, everybody that I talk to afterwards, like doing the job that you did. Oh, okay. You obviously have trauma. Like I automatically qualified for PTSD just because of the job that I did from the VA for like disability, for a certain percentage just from where I was and what I did. So it was almost like, um, a big flashing sign that was like, hey, you have PTSD. And I was pretty reactive when I got back. So it wasn't very long before I admitted like that I had some issues from Iraq. The tough part was admitting that I had issues from childhood and from like even the chronic illness.
Those issues, so you, if you mentioned at the very first when you went to therapy, the therapist wanted to talk about childhood and you're, no, I just got back from combat. So was it not until that point that you got back from combat that you were actually able to recognize that you had childhood trauma, or have you known it long?
It took a little bit longer. So I even worked through some of that combat trauma. And then I started to go after that external checklist. I started to have a little bit of relief from like, I worked on the road rage and I worked on the hypervigilance and a couple other things that were from combat. And I started to have a little bit of relief. So then I distracted myself and poured myself into school. I went back to school and I was going to college for computer information systems. And then I was getting 4.0 and high honors there. I got hired back through the government for a IT project manager and was like 6-figure job. I was a team lead going through the ranks really quickly in that position. I was still getting sick, but we were thinking that I might be like ulcers or something that would heal, that I would be able to fix. But I kept working on that stuff and having the stomach issues, but I was really distracting myself with external things. And I actually, when having the stomach issues, I'd have to go to the hospital and they would have to give me pain medicine, nausea medicine, and an IV bag usually. Well, then the opioid crisis also started around 2013, right when I started working for the government. And when I'd go to the hospital, then they wouldn't treat me anymore. They would just give me like, try to knock me out with like Benadryl and some other things, or just give me the nausea medicine, send me home in pain still. So I actually started to use medication that I would purchase off the streets illegally. And then I became addicted to that. I started using it and justifying, well, I have a good job and I'm still getting a 4.0 in school and da 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 da. So eventually, though, I decided that I could see it was increasing the amount that I needed to take when I was in pain, and it was going to lead to bad places. So I decided to go to rehab for 9 days. And while I was there, I read a book called Unlearn Your Pain and Depression by Dr. Howard Schubner. And he's actually from Michigan. And I'm looking through his thing and it's talking about mind-body connection in the childhood and the core beliefs and all of this stuff it's like the pages are jumping off the book at me. So I'm just like, whoa, this is like, this guy's reading my life. And that's when I started to really dig into the childhood stuff. And that was around 2017, 2018. I went through a lot of books. I read like The Body Keeps the Score. And I don't know, I probably read like 30 something books on trauma and self-help and different things. Then I medically retired from that position. That was the IT position because I kept having the stomach issues. I retired from there in 2020. And then I moved to Costa Rica in 2022. And I was divorced in 2024. And then I wrote the book actually in like 2018, but I shelved it for a while because I had like imposter syndrome and I didn't feel like, I'm not a psychologist and I'm not a doctor. So who am I to be talking to people? And a lot of just like negative self-talk and stuff that I had to work through using some of the tactics that I wrote about in the book, actually. And then I released the book in 2025. And then I started to speak about it on podcasts. And now that's kind of been part of my mission, is to normalize the conversation around mental health and to be a guest and spread the word.
You're doing an important thing. We're on the same page there. That's one of my goals, is to normalize speaking about mental health.
Yeah, I appreciate your platform too, man. It's awesome what you're doing.
Thank you. So when you were back in 2017 seeking help, was there like a turning point or like a breaking point where you were thinking like, oh, I need the help, or was there no like kind of significant moment there?
No, there was some significant moments because of the fact that I could no longer go to the emergency room. All right, I'll be vulnerable. I could no longer go to the emergency room and I could no longer get medication. And now I'm having to do the self-medicating thing. And now I've become addicted even. And so I'm having to take more medicine when I'm sick. And I'm actually somewhat having suicidal ideations of how am I going to live the rest of my life like this? I can't just keep getting illegal drugs to fix this problem that doesn't even fix it, because now I have to take more and I'm addicted. So all these things, and I'm like not wanting to live. And so I had to have somebody take the key to my gun safe and lock my guns up. And that was a turning point where then I went to the emergency room and, I had said something about not wanting to live because I was in so much pain. And they were going to admit me to a psych ward. And I decided I had talked to him and I was like, I'm not really suicidal. Like, I'm not going to kill myself. I just don't have any options. I don't know what to do. And so I promised it. Had already signed up to go to rehab at that point because I had that episode where I had to take more pills and it didn't work. And I ended up, so I'd already found a rehab place. And then it was like a day or two later that I had another episode and had to have the guns locked up. And so I told them, I'm like, I have this rehab set up and my parents have my gun key safe or whatever the guns are in my house. They have them. And so she didn't make me go to the psych ward and just allowed me to go to that rehab. And so that was kind of like a culmination of suicidal ideations, having to take more pain medicine and being addicted and all of that coming to a head.
Yeah, and suicidal ideation is really hard to deal with. I've had some moments with that myself. It's not easy to work through.
I got some tactics for that though. It's, for me, it comes as questions. I always have questions pop into my head, like, what are you doing this for? Why are you still fighting? What's the point? And so I have answers for those questions. And doing so, I have a mission statement that I write, and that kind of helps me find purpose and lay it out. Like, how do I want to show up in my role as an author, as a speaker, as a Christian, as a father, whatever your roles are. And then you write down like how you want to show up in those positions. I also keep a gratitude journal. And then I have positive affirmations, like 10 to 15 that I have written down or memorized that I repeat. And with the mixture of that, when I start to have those, I have to do this. I have to practice this as a daily thing, because when it gets bad, I can't just start doing it when it gets bad. So when I do have the suicidal ideations where I'm going into that depression hole, I can refer back to my mission statement. I can read my positive affirmations that this is temporary, these things that remind me that it's going to be okay, that the pain will go away. And then I read my gratitude journal to see all the things that I've been grateful for recently. And that helps me to answer those questions.
It's good stuff. I love it. What were, like, when it came to therapy, what were some of the first ideas or maybe even books that really clicked to you and that helped you begin to shift your mindset?
All right. I really liked EMDR therapy. It's a little bit abstract sometimes, like you're reprocessing things. But how I got over that weirdness about it was that, if you've ever watched on TV, like somebody roll their ankle or get injured and you can actually like get goosebumps and feel it, it didn't really happen. You just watched it happen. Well, you can have like a memory, and you can do that for a positive thing. So you can think about a time when you were grateful, a time when you were happy, and you can actually release chemicals into your body as if you were experiencing it at that moment, even though it's just a memory. And so you can have by thinking about these things that may not, that are happening or that have happened as a memory, you can actually trick your body into believing that it happens. So it's a pretty interesting trick, and the same concept applies.
I've heard about EMDR before. I've never done it. I think at one point my therapist was talking about it, but something else worked for me, so we never ended up
Yeah.
doing it.
So by doing the trick that they have you do in the EMDR part, it's like, that's like tricking your body. Your body doesn't know that you're reprocessing it with something different. So it's pretty cool. But I'm sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead and tell me about.
No, you're good. I was going to say, I love hearing about the different forms of therapy that work for people.
Yeah. And then as far as books, you asked about books. I really liked 7 Habits for Highly Successful People. The Body Keeps the Score is another good one. Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow by Daniel Kuhnen is another really interesting one about like how your brain works. It's more brain science. Then there's another one. It's a cuss word. It's called Unf Yourself by, I forget who, somebody Bishop, but, that one's a good one. And then there's like 12 Rules to Life by Jordan B. Peterson. It's another really good one that I liked. So those are some of the ones that I think I would recommend off the top of my head.
And I've heard of a few of those.
And of course, Internal is Greater Than External, Calming the Chaos Within by Cole Grace. That's another good one.
Make sure to add that one to the list.
Yeah.
When you were writing your book, what was the process like? Was it hard for you to write? Did it just stir everything up in your mind, or were you okay as you were going through the writing of it?
It was healing, to tell you the truth. It helps me in order for me to present or teach something, I really have to dig in and learn it. So I really I even went further in depth into things and reread some of the books and some of the parts to make sure that, what I'm saying is factual and not, it's experience based, but also like that I have things that back it up and where I got it from. And also being authentic, like I'm not going to write about something that I'm not doing myself. So it really helps me hold myself accountable. Like, you're going to be talking on these podcasts and writing a book, you better be like living it. You know what I mean? So it's really helped me to be accountable for that, and then to use those tactics to see the benefits of it, and then to understand the scientific and neuro type reasons why it works is pretty cool.
And so you mentioned that you shelved the book for a bit. You wrote it in 2018. Did it come out till 25? What uh what made you decide in 25 to like pick it up and actually get it published?
Well, I'm a Christian too, and I felt like this calling that I was supposed to write the book. And I really, when I wrote it, I flew through the pages. I wrote 80% of it in like 3 months. It was all but done. I just had to like transition the chapters, write the introduction, and write the conclusion. But I stopped working on it. I was having problems in my marriage. The pandemic hit. I retired from work. And then, I didn't feel calm in my own life. And I had a lot of negative self-talk about being vulnerable and about how I would be judged, and not really wanting to deal with any of that. So I kind of just started having the story of, well, it was healing for me to just write what I did, so that's enough. But I kept feeling this calling, like, no, it's not. You need to put this out. You need to do this. And so finally, after the divorce and after all that, I got the book back out to really just start doing it for myself again, to start going through and start doing the work again. And in doing it, I was like, man, this is actually still relevant. This many years later, there's not much left. I don't have to change much. I just have to add a little bit here and there. So I was like, I'm going to finish it. And I finished it in a couple months, published it on Amazon, and didn't get nearly the bad feedback I thought I was going to get. That was all like self-projection. And so I had to use a lot of the tools in my book to overcome the negativity, and to be nicer to myself, and to move forward without being perfect, and to realize that that's an advantage, that's actually powerful, that I'm not coming from a place of I have it all figured out. I'm coming from a place of I'm still working through this too, and this is what's working for me.
Yeah, and it's crazy. It's like we're always our own like worst enemy when it comes to criticism.
Man, so mean to ourselves
Yeah,
compared to how we are to other people. It's crazy.
yeah. It's uh, it is crazy. But like you've talked about a couple times, positive affirmations, that type of stuff they have played a huge role for me as well.
Yeah, and everybody I talk to on this whole circuit that I've been doing, I've been on like 15 or so mental health podcasts recently, and it's a consistent theme that this stuff works, and your thoughts manifest into reality. And if you have negative thoughts, you're going to have a negative reality. And I never really believed that, but it's true.
I'm right there with you. I didn't believe that for the longest time until I actually went to started going to therapy. And when he was telling me all this stuff, I was like, and I actually tried it. I was like, oh, this actually works. Like 2 years ago, I told you were lying. Like, there's no way
Yeah.
that the person I was like 2 to 5 years ago would have even tried this.
Right. Like just being positive is going to change my life. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd have told you whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. That would have probably said some not nice things, but and so for me to be saying this and sitting here talking to you about it is important for people to realize that, it works, and it doesn't happen overnight, and it takes practice. But once you start to see the results, you'll become addicted to it, and you're going to love reprocessing things that are blocking you. And once, you're going to notice all of your relationships improve, from like business to personal, romantic even, and family. They've all improved as I've become more humble, and as I've worked through some of my triggers and become more calm. My whole life has changed. So
Yeah. I tell a short story about the calmness aspect, because I'm actually seeing that a lot in my life right now. I'm married and have 3 young kids. And
yeah,
one of my problems is like a lot of times I have a issue with overreacting too quickly. I should say at all, like not even too quickly, but I have a little bit of a temper sometimes. And I know my kids have seen that, and I don't want my kids to see that. And so, um, my therapist is like, we've always had let me go back a little bit. We've always had a problem with like bedtime, which I think is fairly normal.
right.
Maybe
But
I'm
it's
mistaken.
frustrating.
Yeah. But it's like, kids like, oh, I need to eat. I'm not ready for bed. I don't want to get in my pajamas. Like, blah, 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 blah.
All the excuses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, anyways, I talked to my therapist about it, and he's like, well, maybe you need to just try to be calmer instead of like going and just turning off the TV and saying, okay, you're not having TV for 2 or 3 days now. And like giving that reaction, just, have a calmness to you. And I've tried it in the last like 2 weeks, and I can see a huge difference. My kids
Yeah.
are starting to recognize it. So like bedtime for the past like 2 or 3 weeks has just been so much easier.
Isn't that crazy when you look
Yeah.
at your own stuff, what you can control, and then
Yeah.
how that influences the external? You worked on the internal and just influenced the external completely by working on the internal. And that's amazing. This, it's like stoicism, and it's being, there's a quote that I heard that was called, it was like, be the thermostat, not the thermometer. So you're the one as a thermostat setting the energy or setting the temperature. You're not just reading the temperature. And so a lot of times when we're reacting to things, we're like a thermometer, like somebody sets off, a stimulus, and then we respond or react to it, instead of, I'm not going to let you control my inner feeling. You're not going to throw me off my center and make me reactive. I'm in control. I'm calm. No, you don't need a water. You had a water, this, that, the other, whatever, and just remain calm. And once kids are weird, man. They can sense that energy and read it more than your words. And so if your energy is all anxious and upset, then they know that they kind of got you. But
Yeah.
if you're just not putting up with it, but you're not reacting to it, it's like, all right, I guess he's just serious. And
Yeah.
like you said, it's weird when you turn internal, how that actually helps you like influence the external more than if you try to focus on that external thing and change it. It's not going to work.
Oh yeah, for sure. And they feed off your energy, good or bad.
Yeah.
But I like your analogy with like you're the one who sets the temperature of the room. It's good. Um, when you started like telling your story to people, like whether it be podcasting or through your book, was it hard for you to be vulnerable, like at the very beginning, to actually get your
Yes.
story out there.
Yes. Sometimes it still is. I don't like talking about how my moments of weakness, that's not something as a society we're kind of trained to do the social media model where you see the highlight reel, and I don't talk about this stuff, and I deal with this stuff on my own. So for me to open up about it, and how are people going to react? Are they going to think that I'm poor me? Like I've had it worse than you, what, all these things that I thought they didn't even manifest in real life. I got a lot of good responses, but we have a tendency, I don't know, you can get like 100 good comments and one bad comment, and likely you'll remember the bad comment. So I just remind myself that, of the good time. Like I had somebody example, I'm having a down day where I'm like, am I being annoying? Are people even really watching this? I'm saying the same thing. It's like the 10th podcast I've done. Maybe I should stop posting some things, or I can keep talking to these other audiences, but I don't know about what my friends are thinking. So somebody that never liked or even commented on any of my videos ever just sent me a message. He's a veteran friend of mine, and he said that, keep doing what you're doing. It's inspiring, and I'm going to get help in whatever date in June. And so that was an uplifting, message. God kind of knows when I need one, and sent it my way, and just a reaffirming of the fact that, and I still get down sometimes. I don't have it all figured out, but I still have to refer back to the things that I know work, give myself grace for falling off for that moment, and get back on track. And that has really helped, instead of beating myself up and going down the negative path. Well, like, oh, if you can't even stick to the diet, what's the point? And then just giving up. Or, if you missed the gym today, then why even go tomorrow? And you can really get into this defeating, self-sabotaging type thing. So I use those, like I said, the positive affirmations, the gratitude, and the mission statement to remind myself, this is what I want. And I don't care if I feel like doing it, it's part of my mission, part of my purpose, and doing that and pushing through that sometimes, and just having that reminder lets me just kind of remember that, this is important. And it's really changed my life in that aspect of giving me a purpose and a reason to, purpose out of the pain.
Yeah, of course. And those one-off comments like that's really, to me, what makes it worth it. Like,
Yeah.
I say to myself, if I even just reach one or two people, and I get just few comments like that, people reaching out saying like, I was able to open up because of you. Like I was able to share my story or do this, or it made me feel better. Like that's really important to me, because I know this is a way that
100%.
I can help people to the best of my knowledge. Like,
Yeah.
'cause I'm not a therapist. I'm not that type of person at all.
Right. And like you said before, a lot of times we can be our own worst enemy, our own worst critic. And then having those reminders to pull you out of that, and to help you, and those are things that I put in like my gratitude journal. And then I can refer back to those when I am finding myself in a negative, like, it happens, man. You get in a funk. And the key is not figuring out how to never get in a funk or how to never have anxiety. It's how to deal with it when it happens, and how to
Hmm.
shorten the time that you're in it. So,
Yeah.
that's what I try to teach.
Yeah. Which is an important concept to teach, because I think too many people out there believe that like your anxiety or depression goes away. And I'm not saying that you can't have spousal depression. Maybe you don't have like clinical depression or whatever, and you just get in a rut and you get out and you're completely fine. But for the most part, depression, anxiety, PTSD, whatever it is that you deal with, it doesn't go away. It's a work in progress. And you have to rebuild your habits to make things work out for the better.
How far you progress, you can always backslide. You can always have some things happen, and that can set you back. But that's where if you have your identity and your internal things, like your mindset, your attitude, your beliefs, your, calmness, your reactivity, things like that, beliefs, when your external world changes, it's not as detrimental, and it doesn't throw you off as much. Whereas if your stock is in your title, your job, all that stuff can be gone in 2 seconds. And then all of a sudden your world is upside down, because that's where you had your identity. And so that's why in the book I talk about the internal being greater than the external, And when you focus internally, like you were talking about with your kids, you influence that external far greater than, I think the 7 habits of highly successful people talks about your circle of influence versus your circle of concern. Your circle of influence are the things you can change, like you can control if you approach the situation calmly, or how you react, how you respond. Whereas your circle of concern are things that concern you, but you don't have any control over: politics, other people, certain things like that. And he says, if you work inside of your circle of concern will grow. But if you work inside your circle of influence will grow. And so that's where, working on that internal stuff, you're growing your external influence. And so it's really important for me it's not to not acknowledge feelings, like some things are annoying and some things are frustrating.
Mm-hmm.
But once you acknowledge that feeling, how am I going to respond to it? A flat tire is a flat tire. Is it going to ruin your day? Or are you going to be like, this sucks, but I'm going to change the tire and I'm going to call my work, tell them I'm going to be late, and get on with it,
Mm-hmm.
Or you can I always have the worst luck and my boss is going to kill me. And then you call and you're taking pictures of your flat tire and trying to over explain everything and, freaking out for no reason. And then you get to work and everything's fine, but you're still all messed up.
Yeah, you're just making your own day worse. That's all you're doing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
May
Exactly.
not be realizing it at the time.
No, it's justified. It seems like it's the right response, Yeah.
So if there is one thing you could say that this is what I really want people to get out of my book, what is that one thing?
I would say that continual learning, I'll put it that way, that we were talking about it. You're never arrived. And in the book, I talk about iterations, like if you're learning to meditate or whatever, you start small, but then you keep building on it and you keep building on it. And with me, the continual learning, I wrote about doing positive affirmations and doing gratitude and doing a mission statement. And I wrote about it from a experience point of view. But now that I'm talking on podcasts, I'm doing more research and I'm learning about scientifically how it works and neurologically how it works and how those things affect your brain chemistry and more. And I keep adding to it. And, even going through counseling, I continue to dig into things. I don't necessarily dwell on them or whatever, but it's a continual process. And like you were talking about, I don't think PTSD or anxiety or depression go away. And it's similar, I think, with alcoholism or addiction, is that you can abstain from it for a long time, but as soon as you stop doing the work and you go back, it's just as bad as it was before. And so you can progress very far in your healing journey, but then let go of the wheel, stop doing your affirmations, stop doing your gratitude stuff, stop doing your deep breathing, and stop doing all that stuff because you think you're healed, and watch how quickly this stuff starts to come back. You know what I mean? So I think that being cognizant that this is going to be something that it's going to be a lifestyle. And if you look at it like that, I think you'll have a lot better expectation of the results that you're going to get.
Yeah, that is for sure. It is part of your lifestyle. And it, like you mentioned, it doesn't take long for you to fall into old habits, or old ways of thinking. So I just have a few more questions or thoughts on my mind. If somebody that's been in military service and is, home from war or home from being deployed, is going through suffering with PTSD, but doesn't know how to get the help they need, what advice do you give that person?
Yeah, it's definitely difficult without a support system to make that first step. And there's a lot of bureaucratic hoops that you have to jump through to go through military type things. So if you're looking to get disability, there's disability lawyers out there now, and you can talk to them and they'll help you get private doctors to verify your conditions. If you're looking for mental health care, you can go through the VA. They offer a lot more services now. Like they do offer EMDR and some community care where you can not necessarily have to do the exposure therapy or do it through the VA. You can do it through private practice and they'll still help try to figure it out, help you figure it out. once you get into counseling and you start doing some of that stuff, there's programs called like vocational rehabilitation where you can go back to school if you have a certain level of disability percentage, and they'll send you back to school for free and pay for some things. You can use the ADA, the American Disability Act, while you're in school for like absences or hospital visit or anything that you have to do related to your conditions. So I've had to use that because I have the stomach episodes that happen, and I've missed tests and been able to make them up and turn in homework that was due, but I wasn't able to make it. So that really helped me there. It helped me at work too, to work from home and to have special accommodations. But I think one of the big things is to start being nice to yourself and start to the self-love, the self-care, the positive self-talk, the positive affirmations, and to be, because like when you're your own worst enemy and you're the meanest person to yourself, and then you don't have a support system, it's crushing. So if you could work on one thing, if you could just work on being softer with yourself and giving yourself some grace and just taking the next step forward, and it doesn't matter how many steps backwards you've taken, take a step forward and keep taking a step forward. And before you know it, you're going to accumulate a bunch of steps, and it's going to start to add up, and you're going to start to notice a difference, and you're going to continue to progress. So I would say to have hope and to know that there's people who are doing better now who were wanted to kill themselves a few years ago, and that you're not alone, that people struggle. Not everybody says they do, but they do. And not a lot of people show it. So you can get caught looking at highlight reels on social media and being like, man, my life really sucks. But a lot of times, if you were to really look closely at what you envy, you would see like, the details that don't get shared as much, and that there's actually problems everywhere.
And then this question, I ask pretty much every guest that I have on just because I like to hear the different responses. So what do you feel is the biggest stigma to mental health?
I would say, in my experience, it is that mental health is not masculine, that working on your mental health is not masculine. I think that is one of the biggest stigmas and one of the biggest fallacies that there is. Because I think that when you don't work on your mental health, that your emotions control you. And I think that like Stoicism and people like Marcus Aurelius and very masculine men were in control of their emotions. They weren't controlled by their emotions. And they were really in touch with knowing who they were and why they operated the way that they operate and why they make the decisions that they make. And I think that is something that has been like, it's not strong to work on, whatever, to do counseling or to be seeing a counselor or to be doing positive affirmations or some girly stuff, emotions. But I think that's where I would say it's one of the biggest fallacies that I see out there.
Yeah. Yeah. It's our society definitely teaches that like men are supposed to be a certain way, and that's not the way they're supposed to be.
Yeah. Men don't cry, all that stuff. So.
And just kind of a couple little follow-up questions. Where can people find you and your book?
You can never find me. I live in Costa Rica. You can find me on YouTube. It's at @cgrace. And then I have like a playlist where it's all the links to all the podcasts that I've been on. I also have some videos that I made about different chapters in the book. And I'm on Facebook and just Cole Grace. And I'm on Instagram too. I think it's cgrace2180. And but I post a lot of the podcasts on the YouTube. You can find my book on Amazon by searching Cole Grace, and then you'll see Internals Greater Than External, Calming the Chaos Within. And yeah, that's it.
And I'll make sure to put links in the show notes to all those that you mentioned.
All right.
Last thing here, is there anything that we have not discussed that you would like to bring up?
No, I think we did a good job on covering a lot of topics. Again, with the suicidal ideations and things, you're not alone. Don't be embarrassed by it. And you can talk about it with somebody that you trust, or find a counselor or somebody to talk about these things with, and don't just dismiss them and hide them and keep them secret.
Well, thank you, Cole. Thanks so much for joining the show and speaking with us and being so vulnerable. I admire the work that you do and the people, and love that you're out there helping people.
Appreciate it, Travis, and I appreciate what you're doing and providing a platform for people like me to speak on, and an audience. And you're doing great things. I appreciate that.
Thank you. And thanks again to all the listeners out there. Please follow us on all social media platforms, listen, share our stuff. And thanks again for listening. Until next time.